the archive button. Okay. Hi, everybody.
Yes. Greetings, everyone. I'll jump in here, Diane, and my name is Tim Grant, and that was the voice of Diane Pruneau, who I'll introduce in just a moment. I'm having done a practice session with Diane the other day. I know that you're in for a real treat tonight. And before I introduce her, I want to tell you a little bit about how we're going to, since many of you are brand new and have not been on a webinar before, and for those of you who have, be patient for a moment. I'll just give everyone else an overview. Diane will speak for 25 to 30 minutes, and then take your questions for about another 30 minutes, and then I'll ask you to fill out a short evaluation at the end. And those of you who do take advantage and fill out the evaluation will be eligible to win one of two free digital one-year subscriptions to Green Teacher. But you don't have to wait to ask a question, and those of you who've been on before know this, that if you have technical difficulties or you have a comment about something that Diane Pruneau says tonight, by all means, please use the chat box, which is in the bottom left-hand corner, and you can already see that people have made comments there. These are people who've been on webinars before, and for those, if this is new for you, the very bottom left-hand corner, you can see where it's main room, and there's a box to the right-hand side, an empty box, and that's where you type in a comment and hit enter on your keyboard, and then your comment will appear in the chat room. And for example, it would be great to hear where all of you are from. So please let us know, the name of your state or your place. And if you're from outside of North America, where you're calling in from, we'd love to know that. And but if you have any technical difficulties or you have a comment or a question, by all means, you don't have to wait till the end to tell us. If you're not familiar with Green Teacher magazine, it's for the past 20 years, our nonprofit magazine has been publishing the most innovative articles, activities, and lesson plans. Diane, can you move the slide for us?
Yes.
Perfect. And in the past 10 years, we've also had the pleasure of publishing 6 books, mostly comprised of articles that have appeared in the magazine, but which were written for the books. And our audience and the people who write for the magazine are K-12 teachers and people who work in non-formal settings, state parks, nature centers, and so forth. So anyways, thank you very much for this. And if you're not familiar with Green Teacher, I'd certainly encourage you, especially if you find the webinar tonight to be useful, please take out a subscription. Please buy a book and help us keep doing this series of free webinars. As some of you may have heard a minute ago, this session is going to be archived, and so if you can also let others know about that, and we will and in a couple of days that archive will be available. We'll send an email to everyone letting you know about it. So now, let me introduce our very special presenter this evening. Diane Pruneau, or Diane Pruneau, is a professor at the University of Moncton, New Brunswick in Eastern Canada, where she specializes in environmental and science education. She's a director of what's called the Littoral AV, a research group, whose objective is to help adults and young people become more aware of the state of their environment and how to successfully take action. As you can gather from a name like Littoral AV, it's her university, and she herself is it's a francophone institution, teaching primarily in French. So I'm just really delighted. Diane has been a leader in environmental education in Canada for many years. I've had the pleasure of working with her on numerous occasions, and I was absolutely delighted that she would do this webinar for us, because what she was mentioning, Diane, you were mentioning earlier that it's a lot more work to speak a second language and
yes,
to remember.
It's a challenge.
but one advantage that you have, and the advantage that we have tonight, is that because you're bilingual, because you work so well in both the French universe, education universe, as well as English, you have access to a great many more experiences and successful programs around the world than those of us who are unilingual Anglophones. And so we're very, very, and I, that came through when I saw your presentation for the first time. So just to finish off, to give a bit more background about you, Diane, your research programs have been especially dealing with the link people have with climate change, with healthy cities, the process of taking on environmental actions, and the development of sustainability competencies such as risk prediction, futures thinking, decision making, and livable planning. And it's no surprise to me that you've been conducting research projects in Morocco, Romania, and Brazil, as well as, of course, North America. We're just delighted to have that you. Have you been able to hear me okay, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I wasn't sure. And so, again, just finally, let me say thank you again for accepting the challenge of doing this webinar in your second language, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Is it the time to change the slide?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. It doesn't want to change. I'll try another one. Oh, yes. Okay. Is the time for the beginning of the presentation?
Exactly.
Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So, my presentation is about hi everybody. My presentation is about the specific competencies that could be developed in adults or youth in order to implement sustainability, viability, and vitality in our communities. Okay, so today, sometimes the way we think, like deciding and planning for the short term, solving problems in ways that reach the wealthier's goals, and not evaluating the impacts of modifying the environment. This way of thinking led to the progressive destruction of the planet. So it's the time to teach our students to think differently. But how do we want them to think? What do we do in research? We observe people involved in sustainability projects, such as community adaptation to climate change, people work trying to adopt environmental behaviors, and also people building sustainable neighborhoods. We then identify the competencies that these project leaders demonstrate while they work toward their goals. And then we try to develop the same competencies in students or adults. What do we mean by competency? I will just read the definition. For us, competency is a lot of resources and practices, cognitive and metacognitive, cognitive, spatial, temporal, and material, and affective. First, we looked at people trying to adapt to climate change. We look at the competencies that help them in their adaptation process. We looked at 2 groups of New Brunswick citizens, 7 municipal employees, and 5 farmers while they were trying to adapt to climate change. They were working separately. The municipal employees work on sea level rise, while the farmers focus on poor soil quality, which increases vulnerability to bad weather. What was their adaptation process? The 2 groups began by analyzing the impacts of climate change on their field of work and geographical area. They chose a problem related to this impact. They suggested and then implemented adaptation. So when we observe these two groups of people, we noticed many competencies that were necessary for them to use in order to adapt to climate change. One competency is future thinking. They used it to predict how that could happen in their area with climate change. Another competency was risk prediction. They used it to determine the exact zones and people who would be impacted and to target the main risk and their probability. They also used a lot of hindsight to recall the details of past climate events and to learn from them for the future. The farmers mostly used identification and control of variables. They were able to link many variables that could affect their crops. They said if the snow cover is thin, and if there is a lot of rain, we won't be able to get strawberries this year. The farmers also manifested a lot of optimism. They seem to be used to adapt to extreme events, and they were very confident in their capacity to solve climate-related problems. The farmers also demonstrated openness to novelty and interest in learning. They really wanted to learn about all the new farming practices that exist in the world, and they really were ready to try these new practices. And they were the farmer mostly, and also the municipal employees were very good in critical thinking. Like the farmers use their knowledge to critique all the many adaptations action suggested by the presenters during the workshops or by their colleagues. So after that, we looked at another kind of competencies, planning competencies. This time we observed planners, engineers, architects, landscapers, and citizens involved in a successful eco neighborhood, eco quartier, we say in French. It was in the eco quartier of De Bonne at Grenoble, France. So the competencies that we were able to observe were creative problem solving, critical thinking, courage, perseverance, passion, communication. It was not easy for the people involved in the project to communicate their enthusiasm. Also preparing many good plans. They had to prepare many different plans each time that they encountered a problem. And visualization competence, taking into account the specifics of the place, learning together and collaboration, and also future thinking. So, from our research on sustainable projects, new interdisciplinary competencies emerge, like future thinking, hope, also risk prediction, planning. Those skills are not very often taught in environmental education. So, how could we help students to develop these competences, to think about risk, to think about the future, to learn to plan sustainably? And also to think about viability, sustainability, and also vitality when they decide, solve problems, or improve their community. We think that the most important thing is to involve them in sustainability projects. Already when they are in class, it's important to involve them because to develop some competencies, you have to practice them. At this moment, I would like to ask the participants, you everybody that is there, to tell me if you know about these competencies and if you have done some trials with your students. I will continue my presentation after that. I ask you to use the main room, the chat room, to answer.
And of course, if you are not a classroom teacher, but you work in non-formal settings in parks or with youth groups, and you've had some experience with some of the competencies that Diane just mentioned, please tell us a little bit about it in the chat box.
Thank you, Tim. So, Diane said, I asked Project Climate Canada come into my classroom. Anna says, we have students identifying aspects of their schools that could be run more sustainably, and so the students are coming up with research projects and discovering solutions. And Diane says, they really describe the concepts of climate change, of sustainability. And Anna says, such as turning lights off when the window shades are open. Other knowledge about these competencies related to sustainability? Diane says, we are starting a green brigade whereby students are measuring classroom garbage. Diane says, we are composting. I think I will continue. What about environmental decision making? How could we develop this competency in students or any young people who come to a park or to the activities of a group? When you make, what is it to make a good decision? When you are a good decision maker, when you have to decide where to install your house or where or the career that you want to endorse, if you are a good decision maker, first you identify your goals. What do you want with this decision? And then, if you are still a good decision maker, you name numerous alternatives. And then you evaluate each alternative, and you acknowledge cost, time, money, and effort. And you consider available information, the long-term future, and the well-being of ecosystem. And you also have a good deliberation process, and you make a good choice that allow you to attain the desired goals. So, what did we do with the students to develop their decision-making competencies? We work on a project in New Brunswick based on conservation design. Conservation design is a technique brought by Randall Arendt in the U.S. And it's a new way of building an eco-quartier. Usually you try to preserve as much as the natural area as you can, and it helps to protect watersheds, habitat of animals, and groundwater. So we had this kind of project here in Dieppe in New Brunswick, and we involved the students in this project. The new neighborhood, the new eco-quartier was not built yet, and the name of the eco-quartier is the village en haut du ruisseau, the village upon the brook. And we asked the students during a whole school year to make decisions about how the new residents should live in that new neighborhood. So they asked them to make decisions. We asked them to become to play the role of the new residents, and we asked them to make decisions about the types of plants cover they wanted for their lot, the plants that they wanted for their flower beds, the presence of domestic animals in this area, about energy conservation and mosquito management. And during the whole process, during 1 year, they were taught the first 3 steps of the decisional process: to fix their goals, to state their goals, to list many alternatives, and to evaluate, to think about the consequences of the alternatives. And we made them very often reflect on their decision process in a reflexive journal. Did it change the way that the young people were making decisions? Okay. At first, the students considered very simple and basic elements like aesthetics. I choose that because it will look nice, or I choose that because I like that, or because it's easy or effective, or it will save money, or I will not get sick and I will have fun in this neighborhood. They didn't take into account many environmental elements, and they were not. They didn't tend to formulate many alternatives. They use the notion of rights. It may not be the best thing to do for the environment, but it's my right. And there was no deep reflection in their decision. I want lawn because my kids will play on it. After the process, we succeeded in the students better stating their goals and considering more alternatives. Like in the 4th decision, Bernard's goal was to get less mosquitoes in his backyard. In a table, he listed 6 alternatives: using chemical repellent, using industrial repellent, raise fish that eat mosquitoes, etc. So he was considering more different alternatives. What else happened? The students could think about more consequences of the different possible choices. They really wanted to make good decisions, and the deliberation process was longer. They tended to make compromises. Like Paula wanted to have a pet, even if it will chase wild species. She chose to have a dog, but to keep it inside the gate. So we think that it's possible to improve the way the students make decisions. It takes time, but it's worth it. They can do that. Okay, other educational strategies for enhancing decision making. There's the decision tree that you can use for helping them in their decisions. The students write down the goals of their decision in the trunk, and they write the possible alternative and their advantages and disadvantages in the leaves. Another intervention could consist in inviting students to acknowledge their feelings, to consider possible regrets and moral aspects, to build scenarios and avoid the worst case scenario. What about another competency like future thinking? How could we help the students develop this competency? So, some indicators of good future thinking. Futurologists, the scientists that call themselves futurologists, are good in formulating hypotheses and scenarios of what can happen in the future. They can extrapolate current trends to predict the future, and they tend to build a desirable future and propose means for achieving it. So how could we develop future thinking in students? There are some strategies that are proposed in the literature. We tried some of them, like students can create 3 scenarios: the probable scenario, the possible scenario, and the preferable scenario for a specific situation. And the scenarios could be drawing, could be illustrated in drawings, writings, role-playing, games, models. And then it's important that the class evaluate how the scenarios, and then the students are ready to act in the aim of materializing their preferred scenario. Another strategy that we use with the farmers, we used this strategy with farmers in Canada and also in Morocco, and it was really effective. I'm looking for.
And Diane,
okay, so yeah.
And Diane, although we can't see what's, maybe you can tell because we can't read what's on the slide. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about this, what this futures wheel is made up of.
Yeah. So, as you can, maybe you cannot see that, but on the right corner, the farmer said that if there was a thin layer of snow cover, the perennial roots would be less protected, the water reserves would be more limited, pruning would be more easy, but they would need to put more mulch and to use windbreaks. It's just a small part of the futures wheel, but it helps a lot the people to think about everything that could happen and to mix the variables together, and then to think about adaptation. It's very useful in adaptation to climate change. What about risk prediction and other competency? How could we develop this competency in students or visitors? So, what is risk prediction? In the literature, they say that a good risk predictor, I don't know if predictor is a word, but a good predictor could envision many risks and their impacts, gains and losses. He also calculates the probability of the risk, evaluates the gravity of the risk, it identifies places and people at risk, and predict the time when risk will happen. All these details help a good predictor to really be aware of the risk and to evaluate the risk and then to manage the risk. So, educational strategies for enhancing risk prediction in students. You could invite students to think about the different aspects of risk. So, severity and magnitude, dangerous levels of exposure, probability, vulnerability of areas and citizens, time and duration, the community's ability to defend itself, economic values and condition of the threatened population. But a good technique is to take the students for a field trip in which you observe like a coast and predict what could happen to all the elements that have their habitat there. Mapping the risk, this is a technique that we use with the municipal employees. We made a GIS map with them, and with that we could really tell which risks were more probable and which municipality structures could be impacted and everything. Also evaluating risk on a scale. Personalizing risk, looking at the risk from the point of view of different people living in a community, and also expressing risk-related emotions. This is important because when you express emotion about a risk, you become more aware of the danger and also of what the people around you think about the risk. And sustainable planning, another competency. I won't have the time to speak about all the competencies, but the last one will be sustainable planning. What does a good planner do, like urban planner, or people like that? They envision actions. They kind of sequentiate. They make a sequence with actions. They think about times of their realization, duration, frequency, locations, impacts, and circumstances. And they make many plans. each time a new event or a new problem occur, they make a new plan or they change their plans. They evaluate the possible actions, and also they say that it's important to remember the details of the context, objective, and also the plan. And then they monitor the results. So with the students, you can do the same thing that the urban planners do. So you can invite the students to create a shared vision of the place that they want to build for the future. It could be just the school ground or a small area in their community, but if they create a shared vision, they will have to plan and to state their goals and determine their extent, because the students cannot do big projects. And then you invite them to make plans, including the projects and the sequence of action in order to attain the plan, and then to monitor their accomplishments. So, in our work, we will continue to look at the competencies demonstrated by sustainability leaders and try to develop these competencies in young students. And because some educational strategies seem to really improve how students reason about their environment. And also, we will try to link these competences with the concepts of sustainability, vitality, and viability. Like we could ask the students, how could we plan a special place for vitality, for improving strength and resilience in people and natural elements? Or how could we predict risk in the environment in order to avoid people getting cancer? So this was my presentation, and this is the time for questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Diane. And yes, so I'll want to raise another point with you in just a moment, but let me just explain. As you see, it's now an opportunity for each of you on this webinar to type in a question, and if you have more than one question, just type one at a time, press the submit button, and then type a second one, and I'll start retrieving the questions in a moment. So take your time and type them in. Diane, I was going to say, I think what really attracted me to your presentation when we were first talking about this was that here you are as a teacher educator who is doing all of this kind of research with people outside of education, the farmers, the municipal employees, for example, and beginning to see what sustainability competencies look like with groups like that, and then starting to apply it to the teacher education work and to what's happening in schools around you, and starting to develop education programs. It's a really interesting way of ensuring that what happens in school programs is linked to the real world, and it's a way of ensuring that the kind of skills the kids are learning through these competencies reflect the kind of real needs that are already there in the community. I was quite impressed.
Thank you. A participant, Jennifer, asked, what grades was this used in? What it was it about the decision-making competence? If it was that, it was with 6th grade students. Questions?
Yes, one question is, have you used these competencies with any audiences that were not captive? And let me just go double check that question.
Okay. We tried to develop competencies in farmers in Morocco, and it led them to think about many different adaptation actions in their area. we used the futures wheel, which was really effective.
Actually, I'll rephrase the question. So what she is asking is, and I'll read it to you, says, have you used any of these tools with audiences that aren't captive? For example, at a park amphitheater program where you have 45 minutes with an audience of campers. What kind of,
Yeah, the strategies for developing competencies could be used anywhere, except that the development of competencies takes time. So it's not sure you will develop the competency immediately in 45 minutes, but on the long term, it's useful. It
and
helps.
another question.
Okay, I just want to add something. It seems that it helps the people reason and reflect more deeply. Okay, Tim.
Great, thanks, Diane. Another question from Kathy. Hi, Kathy. By the way, good to see you here. And you make the point that you've heard more about systems thinking, and you wondered where systems thinking would fit into the competencies that you have mentioned, Diane.
Oh, I'm not so familiar with systems thinking, but I think the futures wheel is some kind of activity in systems thinking because it encourages what they call linking thinking. So I think this is related, but I'm not so familiar with systems thinking. I've not studied this competency.
Yeah, it would seem to me it's a good. It's certainly another competency that would be an important one in sustainability. But you're right; a lot of these are linked one to another. I have a question for you. Interested in, you mentioned a person named Randall. Sorry, you mentioned a person named Randall when you were talking about I think it was neighborhood design. Could you tell me a little bit more about his work?
Okay, it's Randall Arendt, Arendt, and he has built a new approach to sustainable neighborhood development. It's conservation design. There are a lot of techniques in his model. The first thing that you do when you want to build a new neighborhood, you have to walk in the area in order to identify the natural elements that you want to conserve, and then when you have decided which one you want to conserve, you don't build the houses and the streets the same way that we do usually. There's a large natural protected area that is left completely wild, and then very often the houses don't have pavement to park the cars, and there's also a community area where people can gather, and there's a lot of techniques, the name of the person is Randall Arendt, and his technique is called conservation design. I'm sure you will be able to find a lot of things and photos on the internet.
Great, thank you. My other question was similar to an earlier question about ages. When you're talking about using the futures wheel or scenario building or risk prediction, what's the youngest age that you think could start to be engaged in these topics?
Oh, we have not experimented so much with all the techniques. By experience, I would say maybe fourth graders could do that. It depends on the techniques, but if it depends if you want them to write scenarios, they must be able to write. So It depends on their capacity to write. And about futures will, it could be done with smaller children, I think.
Yeah, futures. I could see the futures wheel. That's certainly true. And obviously, these are things that were, and Kathy mentioned systems thinking, and all of these strategies really, of course, work even better with teenagers at the high school level, or of course, in a camp program in a park amphitheater, as was mentioned. And are you finding that you're able to start including these strategies in your teacher education programs?
Yes, I use them all the time. Yeah. I use them when I teach.
Yeah, just give us an example. That's great.
Oh, wait a minute.
Take your time. I appreciate you're doing this in your second language, and so don't rush.
I'm not teaching environmental education right now. I teach science education, and I don't know. For now, I don't know. Maybe I'll think later about something.
Great, that's okay. Folks, do you have? And thank you, Diane, about telling us a little bit. Sorry. So, any other questions, folks, that you have, either in the chat room or into the back office through the slide that's on the screen? I'm happy to retrieve them and pass them on to Diane Pruneau. Okay, well, I think what I'm going to do is, I'll leave this, I'm going to switch to the end of session evaluation. I have everybody fill that out, and then if there are more questions, we'll stay and continue with questions. But I think this is, we have a small group, so not surprisingly, we have fewer questions. But let me move to this end of session evaluation. And again, those of you who take the time to fill it out will be eligible to win a free digital subscription, a 1-year digital subscription to Green Teacher. And you'll see that there are 5 questions here. It'll take you less than 2 minutes to fill it out. There are a total of 5 questions. You can use the scroll bar on the right-hand side, or to move down to all of question number 3, 4, and 5. It helps us to get a sense of what you liked and about the presentation, what could have been better, and so forth. So.
The language could have been better.
No, you were fine. That was great. For filling this out, Diane, the other thing that really struck me, and it came up as in one of the questions, but these competencies are really just as important in non-formal education settings, like the person who teaches adults in a state park, in an amphitheater with campers with a 45-minute presentation. So these are it seems to me these are just as important to be encouraging in all education settings, whether they be parks, whether they be youth groups in an urban community center, or whether they be in a classroom in a school.
Yeah. I could think about something that I did with my students at the university with for developing their planning competencies. We watched a movie called Truck Farm. I don't know if you know this movie. It's two men who decide to plant a garden in their old truck, and then after that, I asked my students to plan to grow food during this winter in the classroom. And I use some competencies for helping them to think about what they want to plan and where and in what and everything like that.
So this is growing vegetables, for example, during the winter, and it forces them to be very creative in thinking about the conditions that vegetables need, and how do you create those conditions in an indoor setting.
Yeah, it's not so easy. they decided what they wanted to plant, and now some of the plants are growing, some are dead, and that's funny.
Well, indeed, but yeah, so but it certainly gets them thinking about that kind of thing. I'm hearing that yes, that is anyone else, Kathy? I see you're having a problem with the evaluation window. Let me move it back to the top myself. I don't know whether I affected it, but you should be able to move it. The slide that you see there, of course, there's 5 questions, as I mentioned, and there's 2 ways to slide down. You can use the blue bar on the right-hand side of the slide to move it down. If that's not working, you can, of course, put your cursor in the middle of the slide, and then just roll the cursor down to the other. I hope that works. But if not, certainly I will understand if you're not able to submit your comments. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions, so I think I want to thank you very, very much, Diane. You've done a terrific job, and I know that lots of people are going to be looking at this at the archive version over the next week, and you're really doing some wonderful work, and I'm delighted that you gave us an opportunity to share it with us and to help us think about competencies that we should be using when we work with kids, especially, but also with adults. And I think your presentation showed us that really the same competencies need to be applied both to adult and youth groups in both formal and non-formal settings. So you've really helped us quite a bit, and so thank you very much for this. And I want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us this evening. Thank you for filling out the survey. If you found the session helpful, please mention it on Facebook. And if you need a certificate of participation, just send a quick email to myself, tim@greenteacher.com. That's TIM@greenteacher.com. And thank you, Francis, for digging up the URL for the truck farm video. That's great. I see that in the chat room. And yeah, so
good.
So thanks again, Diane. That was really terrific. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. And I hope you can join us again for another webinar. That was really terrific.